the Terrifying Lies podcast, with music and stories by Craig Nybo. Greetings, friends, and welcome to Season 4 of the Terrifying Lies podcast. I can hardly believe that we've arrived. I'm your host, Craig Nybo. If you like the podcast, I invite you to support it by visiting craignybo.com/support and clicking on the links. Even a donation of 99 cents per month helps keep the podcast alive. For this season, I prepared something special. I produced a long-form story of war, violence, plague, and death. Everything you've come to expect when you tune in here. This story, which I have named Red Annex, will extend across most of this season, along with at least 8 new songs, which I plan to release as an interactive book eventually. But you get to hear it first here on Terrifying Lies. I invite you to share the podcast. Post about it, talk about it, invite your friends into the circle. Well, enough dilly-dally. Let's get down to some storytelling. Red Annex, written and read by Craig Nybo. The story behind this story, dedicated to Professors Amber Hanson and Chris Dunn. I hate mathematics. At least that's what I used to think. But when it comes to math, I flounder. I've never been good at numbers. I've always dreaded math class. I scored mediocre or less than mediocre grades throughout junior high school, and college. Recently, I decided to go back to school. Unfortunately, due to my less than stellar math history, Weber State University required me to take 2 math classes, Math 950, pre-algebra, a catch-up course for math lackeys like myself, and a new math class called Math 1810, co-requisite contemporary math. Professors Amber Hanson and Chris Dunn taught Math 1810 via Zoom during the dreaded year of COVID-19. For just over 2 months, I joined the class from my work office. Bit by bit, Hanson and Dunn converted me from a math hater into a math lover. How did they do it? Several of their assignments involved composing story problems. Fact is, if someone asks me to write anything that features the word story, it's not going to involve 2 trains heading in different directions from Paris. Rather, I wrote a problem that features a Haitian banana farmer whose brother dies from a fall during harvest. The farmer intends to bring his brother back to life, but must calculate how many bananas he needs to sell to hire a voodoo priest and pay for spell ingredients, such as dried pufferfish. On another occasion, I calculated how many flaps it would require for a vampire bat to traverse Transylvania. I studied bat breeds, velocity, and flapping frequencies to produce an answer. One night, an idea occurred to me as I crawled through my math homework. What if I integrated math into lengthier stories? This idea cogitated in my head until I settled on a concept that related both to coronavirus and mathematics for my first story. I would get to work when I found more time after semester's end. At first, I intended to write a series of short stories, around 3,500 words each. I would infuse them with occasional math problems that readers could work out if they like. However, I soon discovered that my first math-infused story had more meat than I could hang on such a short word count. So, I fleshed it out into a 40,000-word novella. The result? Red Annex. Red Annex features several along-the-way math problems that you can work. Doing the math, however, isn't required. Instead, you can just romp through the story. That's what I would do. This story would be the most intense extra credit assignment I have ever created if I still attended Hanson and Dunn's course. But the class has long since ended. However, I believe I will turn it in to my 2 professors anyways. Funny thing, neither of them enjoys horror stories. Oh well, you can't have everything. Thank you, Professors Amber Hanson and Chris Dunn, for making math fun. This story is for you. I consider both of you my friends, as well as many other students who attended your Zoom class. Chapter 1. President Arnold Dishel slammed a fist on the resolute desk, hard enough to rattle the painting of George Washington hanging on the Oval Office wall. Lana Joyce, press secretary, flinched. Her proposal to uphold the American way by maintaining the political status quo with press spin in the face of cataclysm unhinged something in Dishel. But he knew as well as her that, try as she might, she could never bring the shine out of shit. "You can't let sensitive information out," said Joyce, her face drawn as the president glanced at the report Dr. Primwell had dropped on his desk. "It's ignorance that hangs the American people," said President Dishel. "It's ignorance that keeps the looters, bombers, and wackos in their parents' basements," said Joyce. "Americans are not idiots. They know a spin doctor when they see one. Besides, what's the difference? By your standards, I've already committed political suicide." All is not lost if you get the right sound bites from the right players. "What are they calling it now, Red Ring?" President Dishel said. "I advise you to use the clinical name," Joyce said. "HC4, said Dr. Ingrid Primwell, director of the NIAID. "Well, the people call it Red Ring, and Joyce, even you can't hide the fact that I ordered the National Guard to throw up walls to quarantine annexes 5 weeks ago. Hell, the San Fernando Valley was our first human cage. Keep tourists from visiting Universal Studios, and sensitive information tends to get out." President Dishel eyed his press secretary. "If you could authorize a more aggressive approach to trials, I think we could speed up vaccine development," Dr. Primwell said. "I'm not giving you uninfected human guinea pigs. We can recover infected and voluntary humans from our annexes. 12 days to the deadline. My team is on track. But the vaccine isn't fully tested. Hell, it might not work at all. We could increase our chances of success by monitoring clean subjects at the moment of contraction and throughout all stages of the infection. We've been over this, and let's call it what it is, shall we? You want to inject healthy people with a deadly disease and study them. We're not reliving the Tuskegee experiments on my watch. I won't authorize you to decide who lives and who dies. And for that matter, if I didn't need you right here, right now, I would fire your ass and put you under permanent surveillance for even suggesting such an atrocity." Dr. Primwell shut his mouth and recoiled. The president ran his fingers through his hair and glanced up at the portrait of George Washington hanging on the wall. He recalled a line from Washington's letter to his brother, John Augustine. "I had 4 bullets through my coat and 2 horses shot under me, yet escaped unhurt, although death was leveling my companions on every side." "Are you with us, Mr. President?" Joyce put a hand on Dishel's sleeve. "Yes, just reflecting." The president turned to Dr. Primwell. "It's not just the virus. It's the animalism," Dr. Primwell said. "Officially, that's what we're calling it. It's a form of encephalitis. The infected's brains become inflamed, and they suffer cognitive deterioration." "Deterioration? They're setting Southern California on fire." "We're doing our best to control the damage in the media," said Joyce. "But it's only a matter of time before the worst of it hits the press. Sir, we have to control our most sensitive information." "Did you see the news this morning?" President Dishel said, pointing at a television mounted on the wall. "Barry Langevin's San Fernando footage has gone more than viral." "I can easily discredit Mr. Langevin. He has crap credentials, sir. He's just an influencer." "It doesn't matter. Watching a gang of what looks like frat boys roast their friend over a fire has a predictable effect on public opinion." "As I said, we're doing what we can." "How many are within the San Fernando Annex?" 2 million, said Dr. Primwell. "How many infected?" Based on the rate of infection and the size of the enclosure." Dr. Primwell glanced down at his palms, slick and upward-facing in his lap. All of them. Any uninfected will succumb within a matter of hours to days." "Are you telling me that we're dealing with a 100% infection rate?" "Within the barrier? That's correct," Dr. Primwell said, folding his hands and resting them on his lap. "In my opinion, I consider those who die before contracting animalism lucky." "What is the death rate?" 12% per day." The president ran an open palm down his face and let out a long breath. "Based on the lab subjects, what is the infection rate of animalism among those who have contracted the virus?" 15% of those infected contract animalism." President Dishel paced the Oval Office, wringing his hands. Joyce and Dr. Primwell kept silent as he worked through the knots in his mind. Finally, he stopped in front of George Washington, put his hands on his hips, and looked up at the painting.
What would you do?
They have plenty of food reserves. Joyce raised a finger. The military drops have taken care of their needs. I've released positive press regarding your efforts, sir.
Damn it! This is not about PR, Joyce. It's about saving lives.
Dr. Primwell cleared his throat. I do need to point out that the food drops are not entirely satisfying the infected. It seems the video released by Langevin isn't an isolated case. The president spread his palms on the resolute desk and leaned his weight forward, focusing his attention on Dr. Primwell.
So they're roasting each other.
The body consumes what it needs. If you're adrift at sea for weeks on end, you crave the eyes and scales of fish you catch, specific nutrients. Are we talking about Night of the Living Dead here? Joyce said. They're not zombies, just infected. And there are certain nutrients in human physiology that they crave once they contract animalism. I've seen it in the lab.
You've given me a 12% death rate per day on a population of 2 million,
President Dishel said.
15% of the infected contract animalism. Even one death is too many. But here's the big question.
Your deadline hits 48 days after we threw up the walls around San Fernando. If I send someone in with your medicine, will there still be lives to save? We're dealing with an exponential death rate, said Dr. Primwell. And they're cooking and eating their own, said Joyce. The president spread his hands expressively.
At what rate are those infected with animalism killing and eating?
Dr. Primwell and Lana Joyce exchanged loaded glances.
People, I need an educated guess here.
Well, I estimate based on lab findings, said Dr. Primwell. For every 3 infected with animalism, they consume a 4th individual per day. The president sank into his Oval Office chair and allowed his eyes to close.
We need to get your vaccine.
There are no certainties. If you inoculate patients with a partially tested vaccine, you run the risk of infecting them or outright killing them. Joyce spoke up. Mr. President, I would not be remiss to remind you that a figurative mob of Americans stands at the White House gates, torches and pitchforks in hand. We've got to throw them a bone, or we're going to have mass hysteria both inside and outside the annexes.
Mr. President?
The voice of Terry Feynman, President Dishel's aide, cracked through the intercom resting on the resolute desk's oak surface.
I think you'd better turn on the television, sir.
President Dishel snatched up a remote control. He aimed it at the wall-mounted television and hit the power button. Shaky camera footage revealed a battle-twisted portion of what used to be Sunset Boulevard. Smoke obscured the shot, billowing from several fires. The camera picked up a group of men and women standing around a Volkswagen van. They held makeshift weapons. One brandished a mile marker sign, hefted like a club. Another clutched a tire iron in one fist. The 6 assailants taunted a man who stood on top of the van. The assailants' hair hung in tufts. Lesions peppered their faces. One woman's tongue, swollen to the size of a baseball, jutted from her mouth. Animalism, Dr. Primwell said. As for the man on the van, he's not far behind them. Dr. Primwell pointed at the man's neck, already glowing with the crimson rash feared by all Americans.
As you can see,
Barry Langevin's voice cut through from behind camera.
The San Fernando Valley has been left to its own devices. Only recently have I been able to scavenge enough equipment together to get a signal out. Violence has become widespread. The video I posted earlier that has tastelessly been dubbed the frat barbecue is nothing. More infected are ignoring the military food drops and opting for human flesh, roasted on hundreds of fires that burn all around town.
Oh, that damn Barry Langevin, Joyce said. This will be the end. There's no way I can bail the White House out of this. She gestured toward the grisly footage on the screen. President Dishel raised a finger at her.
Can you, for once, not make this about your public relations slant?
Barry Langevin went on.
I think everyone here behind the barrier has the same question.
He turned the camera on himself. President Dishel and the others gasped as they recognized the rash around his neck.
Why hasn't the government done anything? Why are they just sitting on their asses while people die in the streets?
Langevin caught the eye of one of the assailants clustered around the Volkswagen, the woman with the swollen tongue. She pointed toward him and shrilled out a clotted shriek. The other assailants turned from their quarry and ran toward the camera. Barry Langevin's shot broke as he leaned into a run. A good-looking middle-aged network news anchor took over the screen.
This from independent journalist Barry Langevin, who is now within the San Fernando Annex. He's asking, why isn't the government doing anything? The rest of us are asking just how long before Red Ring jumps the wall and infects people on the outside. Have epidemiologist Will Steger on simulcast. Mr. Steger, what are your observations of...
President Dishel clicked off the television and threw the remote control. It cracked against the wall and clattered to the floor in pieces. He composed himself before turning to Joyce and Dr. Primwell.
Get me some numbers. I want to know how long it will be before every man, woman, and child in the San Fernando Annex dies. Dr. Primwell, I don't care if you have to get after your team with a whip and iron ball. I want a vaccine by the deadline, even if it isn't fully tested, in the hands of my military. I want needles in arms before, God forbid, Red Ring jumps the barrier and gets us all.
The president turned to Lana Joyce.
Get your team on this. Let's keep the American people appraised of our efforts to develop a vaccine. I need you to hold back the mob until I get viable medicine into those annexes.
He spoke to the intercom.
Feynman?
Yes, sir.
Feynman's voice cracked through the speaker.
Get the Joint Chiefs of Staff in here. I want military teams ready to head into the annexes in 12 days.
Yes, sir.
President Arnold Dishel drew in a deep breath and put his fists on his hips. He glanced at the portrait of George Washington on the Oval Office wall. He glanced at both of his cabinet members in turn.
I don't need to remind you that the security of the United States rests in our hands. So let's move quickly, but step carefully, shall we?
Chapter 2. Do the math. The challenge. Predict how many people will be alive within the San Fernando Annex when military personnel arrive to deliver vaccines. Here are the facts. 1. The San Fernando Annex had a population of 2 million when the walls went up. 2. Military personnel will land in San Fernando with an unproven vaccine 48 days after epidemiologists first discovered HC4, widely known as Red Ring. 3. 100% of the Annex population has contracted HC4. 4. HC4's death rate is 12% per day. 5. Of those who contract HC4, 15% contract animalism, an advanced condition of the disease. 6. Those who suffer from animalism kill and consume 1 human per day for every 3 who have the advanced affliction. If you're up to the challenge, use your own method to solve this problem or read below for an alternate technique. This problem requires solving for a variable exponent. To avoid using logarithms, you can use a spreadsheet. Before laying out the spreadsheet, determine the calculation. First, determine the daily exponential rate of population decline. Use the initial population of 2 million. According to Dr. Primwell, HC4 kills at the rate of 12% per day, or 0.12. Here's the exponential calculation to determine the number of survivors each day. 2 million, the initial population, multiplied by, open parentheses, 1 minus 0.12 HC4 infection rate, close parentheses, raised to the power of days, equals HC4 survivors. Next, determine how many survivors succumb to animalism. According to Dr. Primwell, 15% or 0.15 of those with HC4 contract animalism. Take the calculation of daily HC4 survivors and apply this calculation. HC4 survivors multiplied by 0.15, the rate of animalism infection, equals those with animalism. Dr. Primwell says that the survivors roast and eat 1 person per day for every 3 who have animalism. To calculate this loss in population, use this equation. Animalistic HC4 survivors multiplied by 0.25, cannibalism rate, equals people roasted and eaten. Finally, to determine the number of total survivors, take survivors of HC4 and subtract the number who are roasted and eaten by those with animalism. Here's the equation. 2 million multiplied by, open parentheses, 1 minus 0.12, close parentheses, raised to the power of x, minus, open parentheses, 2 million multiplied by, open parentheses, 1 minus 0.12, close parentheses, raised to the power of x, close parentheses, multiplied by 0.15, multiplied by 0.25, close parentheses, equals total daily survivors. Rather than solving for x, the number of days, on paper using a logarithm, make it more simple by using a spreadsheet. Create a column that contains a running number of days from 1 to 48, the vaccine deadline. Use the value in the number of days field as the exponent variable's value. If the running number of days begins in field A1, then the spreadsheet equation should look like this. Equals 2 million multiplied by, open parentheses, 1 minus 0.12, close parentheses, raised to the power of A1, minus, open parentheses, 2 million multiplied by, open parentheses, 1 minus 0.12, close parentheses, raised to the power of A1, close parentheses, multiplied by 0.15 multiplied by 0.25. Pull down the equation fields such that the value from field A, the number of days, increments from 1 to 48, the vaccine deadline. In the end, your spreadsheet should look like this. The spreadsheet reveals that on day 48, Dr. Primwell's deadline, the population within the San Fernando Annex will have declined from 2 million to 4,165. Here's the good news. Dr. Primwell produces an experimental vaccine at day 44, 4 days before his deadline. On that day, 6,945 survivors exist within the barrier. Here's the bad news. The NIAID vaccine doesn't work as a cure. But all is not lost. Dr. Primwell's staff of world-class epidemiologists synthesized a serum that slows the advance of HC4 symptoms. The NIAID hopes to buy time with their serum to develop a cure. The serum's instability caused President Dishel to order his press secretary, Lana Joyce, to keep its existence from the public until Dr. Primwell can produce a cure. Dr. Primwell persists in his request to get uninfected test subjects. In an effort to save lives, test the serum, and get uninfected patients for Dr. Primwell, President Dishel ordered an Army Special Forces Operational Detachment A, ODA, into each annex. Each ODA's medical sergeant carries a refrigerated pack of 100 doses of Dr. Primwell's serum. Dr. Primwell ordered blood tests on every soldier before deployment to establish a baseline for future vaccine tests. Each ODA received orders to recon the annexes, to inoculate and evacuate as many infected as possible, and to avoid confrontation with those who suffer from animalism. All deployed soldiers understand that they will become infected. As patriots, they plan to come back from their recon aid and extraction missions as test patients for the NIAID to help advance a cure. Medical Sergeant Amy Peltier, embedded with ODA 2574, carries a refrigerated pack of 100 doses of serum. Her detachment, led by Commander Philip Orton, sits strapped to rumble seats inside a Chinook helicopter, flying over a network of concertina walls thrown up around 450 square miles of the San Fernando Valley, America's highest profile quarantine annex. This has been Red Annex, Chapters 1 and 2, written and performed by me. For today's song, I give you some nasty blues funk, a song about war, pestilence, totalitarianism, and the end of the world, baby. I give you Man in Line.
Mighty low. The man is knocking, telling me where to go. Taking my money, throwing bombs in the air. Seems like there's
This has been Man in Line, composed and performed by me, with the incomparable Bernardo Iacona on drums. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Terrifying Lies. I truly appreciate you tuning in, and I consider you all my friends. Until next time, I bid you sweet dreams, or should I say, sweet nightmares. This has been the Terrifying Lies podcast. Please come again. You're welcome here.